Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So if you're familiar with my archery videos, and you're one of the people wondering how I go about my bowmanship, I finally put together this video sharing my knowledge and useful tips that will hopefully have you hitting headshots like a medieval Hawkeye. Now I can only speak from console experience, so this may not be relevant or correct in terms of the PC sandbox, but if you're on console, whether it be last or current gen, this video should hopefully help. Some of you have left comments on my archery videos requesting an archery guide. Now I've never done anything of this nature before, but I'll do my best to share what I consider to be key tips to be a successful archer in Chivalry 2. I'll try to cover some unspoken in-game errors too that pertain to archers and how these errors can directly negatively portray the class. Firstly, for those curious, these are the settings I use regardless of class. I play on a PlayStation 5 on a standard controller. I switched the next-gen exclusive performance setting to prioritize frame rate. As far as Chivalry in-game settings, I switched motion blur off. This is a hindrance, you should do the same if you haven't already. My sensitivity settings are 1.50 for both horizontal and vertical, and all other settings are factory default. Now speaking of errors, as mentioned a few moments ago, here's one that I've encountered multiple times recently. When spawning into the archer class from the class selection screen, if there's no archer slots left, despite the game displaying there was, you will spawn in as a knight, but with the javelin class small shield and no right hand weapon. Amusing at first, but annoying when you just want to play archer. Now let's talk about environmental hitboxes, because these are quite simply broken on console, and as an archer, they can be your worst nightmare, and they should be an asset. So there, you just witnessed me jump shoot with the crossbow well below the environmental above me, yet the hitbox is so distinctively large it can still trigger, causing you endless grief. I mean, just watch this.
I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me.
So it's things like this that can get you kicked from a game. It generally develops into widespread condemnation and hatred for archers. You can clearly see I'm aiming well below the chandeliers, so please consider this if you weren't already aware. Now on the flip side to this is using it to your advantage. If you're aware of generally where the environmentals are on any given map, you can trigger the same broken hitboxes from afar, much to the surprise of those standing below. Now in my videos, you see me hit many crazy long shots, and when it's clean, it can be a thing of beauty. But this isn't always the case, and it can be a challenge judging fall distances, not to mention moving targets. The trials and challenges of hitting long shots are not without their in-game errors either. Take these examples as evidence of a frequent occurrence in every match I play as archer. Despite lining up what should be the perfect shot, there is just zero hit detection, leaving you feel unsatisfied and cheated. It's not something that happens too often to be game-breaking, but often enough to notice it's definitely an issue. Whether this is server-side, connection-based, or an in-game bug, I'm not sure, but it's another trait archers must be aware of and live with if they want to take the class seriously. Now let's talk about which bow is worth your time. This is simple, the war bow. There was a time at launch where the longbow reigned king. In fact, my most watched video on my channel features this bow, but since recent updates and the warbow's induction into the game, the longbow just falls well short of being ideal as the high kill efficient distance death dealer we all want. Now that title is owned by the warbow. She is your friend, your partner, your ally to rain hell upon your enemies at all ranges. Special mention also for the crossbow, which also destroys in the right hands and actually requires less skill to master. Check out my crossbow video, I'll link it at the end of the video. So the warbow has slower drawing and knocking of arrows in comparison to its counterparts, but it makes up for it with its stopping power and lethality over range. Its drawbacks are it's a much heavier and cumbersome bow that requires patience and timing to master. But if you're serious about archery in Chivalry 2, look no further. Again, I linked my most recent archery video specifically utilizing the warbow at the end of this video. So when it comes to archery, there are simple things you can do to avoid being a nuisance to your teammates and also improve your output of the process. Positioning. Think about your surroundings. Where is the enemy spawning from? Where are your teammates spawning? Position yourself accordingly depending on map and what the given objective is. For example, give yourself less opportunity to be flanked and ganked by bloodthirsty archer haters. Try positioning yourself in places your enemy won't be expecting. This can also provide you with an exit strategy if things go west. Help your teammates beyond using just your bow. For example, if you don't have a clear shot, take these moments to kick petards away from the objective you're trying to protect. Just promise me one thing, guys. Don't be like this guy. Whilst resupplying arrows at a supply crate on Gallancourt, I got killed by an arrow, but the angle seemed suspicious to me given the fact I'm behind my team's front line and the arrow seemingly came from behind or to my flank. And sure enough, upon respawning, I curiously scanned our flank and found our culprit cheating in an out-of-bounds area. Now archers get a bad enough reputation as is, so this behaviour is counterproductive to all of us. I mean, if this guy feels inadequate enough that he needs to cheat in a game like Chivalry, he needs to seek help. Consider teammates. It can get crazy in Chivalry 2. We've all been sandwiched in the vanguard with chaos ensuing all around us, but listen for enemy footsteps or taunts at your flanks, and take your time to pick your shots, avoiding your brothers. I frequently jump shoot over crowds when I know there's no clean visible shot, and you'd be surprised how often you snipe the intended target. Lead your shots and stick flip. When it comes to archery, the hardest shots to hit are moving targets. Practice leading your shots and aiming ahead of the target. For even more finesse, if you're an adept archer, you'll be flicking the thumbstick at the exact moment you release your arrow. The purpose of flicking the thumbstick at the precise moment takes advantage of aim assist, and is a long-used tactic in gaming, predominantly in sniping. While archery is medieval sniping, so the same rules apply. This takes practice, however, if it's something you've never done before, but with patience and persistence, you can master the timing, as it pertains to Chivalry. And if you can hone this art, you'll be terror on the battlefield. And this extends even beyond Chivalry, as I said, into other games, so it's a priceless skill if you're uninitiated. This skill alone is what separates 90% of archers in their success rate with bows, crossbows, and javelins. You've probably noticed I use the arrow cam a lot too, on long shots. This is not just for visual aesthetic, as it's a tool that should be used to help judge your distances. It's fiddly to use on console, as you have to hold down the square button whilst holding in the left thumbstick upon release of your arrow. But again, with practice, it's an invaluable feature that you should be using. Now, to be specific, the way I play Archer on console is no different to a first-person shooter. In Chivalry, you can knock and fire an arrow all by pulling the right trigger. However, by utilising the left trigger in conjunction, no different than you would a shooter to aim down sights, you may find your aim to be more true, stable, and shots more accurate. It also zooms in slightly, but given the already handicap-reducing field of view on console, it doesn't really serve much purpose, at least in my experience. I make use of the left trigger purely as I have decades of muscle memory on shooters, and this feels way more natural to me when aiming those trickier shots. Try it yourself if you didn't already use this tactic. Now, let's talk about jabs. Often in this game, you'll be deep in an archer trance, and before you know it, you're being swarmed by a rage-induced enemy, or five. It's easy to panic in this situation and be a rabbit in the headlights, but allow me to draw attention to the best-kept secret amongst veteran archers, your jab. With bow in hand, you're seemingly helpless against a marauding enemy eagerly trying to split you in two, so a quick jab timed right can interrupt their attack and give you the window needed to draw your melee weapons and even the odds. The drawback here goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the warbow being cumbersome. The jab is slow and can actually feel unresponsive at times on console. This is where the longbow does actually reign supreme, as it's considerably faster and responsive to perform. While still useful on the warbow, it's not 100% reliable, so be warned. Now, misdirections. Other fun side notes I should mention are misdirections. If you find yourself in an encounter where you're forced to engage with the enemy, sometimes a simple cheeky emote can intrigue the player and encourage them to return the interaction, presenting that extra window of time for allies to arrive.
Sorry!
But be warned, not all players can be trusted, so do so at your peril.
I'll help you! Don't worry, I'm right here! Yes! Yes!
Fair play to that guy. I completely stacked it. I should mention it, despite it being obvious, but move. Movement is your ally. If you watch my archery content, pay close attention to my movement. Rarely do I stand completely still, unless it's for really long shots. I'm always shuffling and strafing in various directions to remain unpredictable and harder target for anyone with the bow trained on me. It goes without saying really, but you'd be amazed at how many archers I see completely stationary and not changing positions between shots. This is a basic. I won't be elaborating further on the basics because they're just that, basic. You can learn them yourself through trial and error. Now lastly, and sadly, it seems the hatred for archers runs deep, and I find myself continuously getting violated by toxic teammates just for using the class. I've noticed this occur exponentially since the Steam release, so read into that what you will. There's a stigma around the class that we're all team-killing noobs, but the ironic truth is it's one of the most technical classes to use proficiently, and I can guarantee you melee weapons are responsible for way more team kills than bows if the data was made available. When the archer class is played correctly, and with the best intentions of the team, a few good archers can help their team dominate. So if you're watching this because you're an archer yourself, or thinking of picking the class up, I salute you. Don't be deterred by some of the negatives. It's one of the most fun classes in the game and really rewards skill. Just remember some of the key things I've mentioned in this video, and with practice, patience, and perseverance, you will walk the battlefield feeling like medieval Hawkeye.
They must not fall into the hands of the enemy!
Thanks for watching, folks. I'm sorry if this video didn't teach you anything new. I didn't want to cover obvious tips. I thought I'd highlight some lesser-known tactics and issues that any decent archer should be aware of. I realise this ain't no in-depth bow guide. I can only speak from my experience and how I personally play archer, and the points I've raised in this video I consider to be of great importance if you want to have the most success in the class. For those of you who frequently ask questions regarding my gameplay, I hope this will suffice. If anything in this video has been of use, then I'm happy. As promised earlier, here are my last two archery uploads using the warbow and crossbow respectively. Now I've been Wolfborn, have a great day, stay safe, and I'll hopefully catch you in the next one. Peace.